The suitcase stood by the hallway like an uninvited guest. I heard the door open before I saw him. His silhouette filled the frame, and for a second I didn't recognize him. Broader shoulders, a sharper jawline, eyes no longer boyish but slow, observant. He stepped in, smiled at me like nothing had changed, and I smiled back, though my stomach tensed. He was supposed to be gone for good. He'd built his life elsewhere, carved his independence, moved on. But now he was here again, under our roof, in the house that had settled into quiet routine. My husband called it home. I called it stillness. There was nothing wrong between us. Nothing loud, at least. No fights, no bitterness. Just long silences filled with shopping lists, calendar reminders, and the soft hum of evening news. He touched me like someone folding linen. Careful, clean, impersonal. I'd convinced myself that was enough. At dinner, the three of us sat at the same table we always did, with the same dishes I always made. My husband asked questions about work, about the move, about plans. I watched our guest. The way he held his fork, how his fingers wrapped around the glass, the way his glance slipped to my collarbone when he thought I wouldn't notice. He didn't smile when I caught him. He didn't look away. Later, I stood in the bathroom brushing my hair. The mirror fogged from the steam. I wore a loose shirt, the one I used to sleep in during summer, thin enough to forget it was there. The door was slightly open. I left it that way. Not carelessly, not unconsciously. I just didn't close it. From the corner of my eye, I saw a figure pause. He didn't enter, didn't speak. But the air shifted. My skin, damp from the shower, tingled like it had memory. I dried my face slowly, waiting to hear retreating footsteps. Instead, I heard nothing. The kind of nothing that presses itself against the edges of your spine and waits for acknowledgement. I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to my husband, listening to the rhythm of his breathing, steady and shallow. I stared at the ceiling, the familiar crack in the plaster above our bed. I'd painted over it once. It came back. It always came back. By morning, I still hadn't decided whether I felt threatened or awakened. All I knew was that something had entered the house when he did. Something unsaid. Electric and far too close. The morning moved slowly, like syrup over cold porcelain. My husband left early. Some urgent errand at the office. I stood at the kitchen counter in my robe, stirring coffee that had already gone bitter. He walked in barefoot, his hair tousled from sleep. The shirt clung slightly to his skin. He didn't say anything at first, just nodded, then opened the fridge. The silence between us was unfamiliar. Not uncomfortable, not yet, but waited. He reached for the orange juice. I noticed a faint scar along his forearm I didn't remember. When he poured, he did it with both hands, unnecessarily careful. I dropped my spoon. It clattered against the tile, the sound sharp and final. We both bent down at once. His hand brushed mine, fingers closing over metal. I felt it, the way a dormant limb stirs with sudden blood. "Thanks," I said, too fast. "You okay?" he asked, his voice calm, but it lingered on the vowels. "Didn't sleep well," I lied. He didn't challenge it. He left the kitchen first. I watched his back as he walked, the fabric stretching between his shoulders. I should have felt shame, should have looked away. But I didn't. Later, I opened the drawer where I kept things I hadn't worn in years. A silk camisole, too sheer to be practical. Lace underwear, still with the price tag. I held them up to the light, remembering the version of myself who'd bought them. Young, curious, not tired. I didn't dress for seduction. I dressed for memory. I passed him in the hallway. He didn't speak, but he looked. Looked in a way that made my skin tighten beneath the fabric. I walked into the bathroom, letting the door close halfway. Again, not fully. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from exposure. I could feel the cotton clinging to the curve of my waist. I turned the faucet, steam rising around me. I caught a glimpse of him through the mirror. He was there in the doorway, still. His eyes locked on mine. Not the eyes of a boy, not even of a son. Something else. Something undeniable. He stepped closer, slow, as if testing each breath. I didn't move. The air was thick with heat, and something under it. Desire, confusion, the heavy pulse of danger. He stood behind me, his reflection beside mine in the glass. His hand didn't reach for me. His mouth did. It was brief. No firework, no gasp. Just skin on skin, a press of lips against the line where my neck met my shoulder. No hunger, only reverence. I didn't stop him. I didn't even blink. When he pulled back, he didn't wait for my reaction. He just left. The hallway swallowed his steps, and I remained there, water running, heart beating as if I'd just surfaced from deep water. I looked at myself in the mirror. Not for flaws. Not for guilt. I searched for the line that had been crossed, and I couldn't find it. I spent the rest of the day moving through the house like someone trying not to wake a sleeping animal. Every creak in the floorboard, every glance from the hallway mirror felt like a question I didn't want to answer. The ordinary had become tense. The hum of the dishwasher, the ticking of the wall clock, even the slight unevenness of the living room rug. I was suddenly hyper-aware of the space I took up, the sound of my breath, the way the air shifted when I walked. When my husband came home that evening, he kissed my cheek and asked how my day was. I told him it was quiet. He smiled, satisfied, and disappeared into his study. There was nothing cruel in his indifference, just blindness. His love came in forms that didn't touch the skin. It was calendars filled with appointments and bills paid on time. It was dependable, but it was never tender. After he went to bed, I poured myself a glass of wine and walked upstairs to the bedroom. I opened the closet and stood in front of the row of clothes that no longer meant anything. Cotton dresses, practical sweaters, bras that prioritize structure over sensation. My hand paused at the far end, where old pieces hung like forgotten versions of myself. I pushed past a jacket, then another, until I found it. Deep red lace, soft as breath. I hadn't worn it in years, not because it was too revealing, but because it once made me feel like something more than a wife. I slipped it on. It didn't fit the same way anymore. Not tighter, not looser. Just different. My body had changed, and I wasn't sure if it had betrayed me or finally begun to speak. I stepped into the hallway and made my way down toward the guest room. The light from under the door had a softness to it. I didn't knock. I kept walking. But just as I passed, it opened. He stood there barefoot, shirt hanging loosely off his frame, book in one hand. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. I stopped just briefly. Long enough for him to see what I was wearing. Not clearly, not explicitly, but enough. Enough to know it wasn't something I wore for laundry or sleep. His eyes moved slowly, not with lust, but with something heavier. Recognition, maybe. Not of me now, but of me before. Before I learned how to fold myself into acceptable shapes. Before I became an accessory in my own life. I was looking through old photo albums, he said finally, holding up the book. Those are full of people I barely remember being, I answered. He nodded as if understanding more than I said. You look different, he added. I was different. We stood there in silence, the kind that feels more like weight than air. I didn't step forward. I didn't step back. I just waited. Not for him to speak again, but to see if I could still stand in my own skin without apology. He reached out, offering me the album. I took it, and in that moment, our fingers touched again. A second too long. A fraction too slow. This time, I looked away first. Back in my bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed with the album unopened in my lap. I didn't need to see the pictures. I remembered the feeling of those years, who I pretended to be and how easily I let myself disappear. And now someone had seen me. Not the wife. not the host. Just me. I turned off the light and lay down beside a man who didn't ask what I was thinking, but someone else already knew. He called that morning in a rush, speaking through the static of traffic and overlapping meetings. Something had changed at work. A presentation got pushed, a client moved dates, and just like that, the trip we were supposed to take together, the weekend escape he gifted me for our anniversary, became mine alone. "You should still go," he said. "You've earned it. Some time for yourself will do you good." I held the phone between my shoulder and ear while zipping my suitcase. He spoke like a man who thought generosity was enough. I told him I'd go. I said thank you. I meant neither. It wasn't until the afternoon that the door to the guest room creaked open. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed, eyes soft. "You're really going?" "I am." "Alone?" A beat passed. Apparently. He looked at me not with sympathy, but something quieter. Understanding, maybe. Or curiosity that had nowhere else to go. "You want company?" he asked. His voice was even, cautious. The kind that floats a suggestion without pressing it. I should have said no. I didn't. "I wouldn't mind a driver," I replied. We didn't speak much during the drive. The road curled lazily through hills, the sky low with evening. The silence wasn't awkward. It was full, thoughtful. I watched his hands on the wheel. Confident, relaxed. Occasionally, he'd glance over, but never too long. I watched his hands on the wheel. Confident, relaxed. Occasionally, he'd glance over, but never too long. I pretended not to notice when our fingers brushed on the gear shift. Pretended it didn't feel like something returned. The inn was small, tasteful, just past the edge of town. Wood-paneled walls, thick curtains, the kind of place designed for intimacy without explicitly naming it. He helped me with my bag. I didn't stop him. The receptionist asked, "One key or two?" I answered, "Two," too quickly. Later, after I'd showered, I found him on the balcony. He'd brought a bottle of wine from the car, already opened, 2 glasses half full. The air was cold, but he'd thrown on a hoodie, sleeves pushed to the elbow. I joined him without a word, wrapping myself in the oversized cardigan I always traveled with. The one that didn't belong to me originally. It had been my husband's. We sipped in silence, listening to the wind move through the trees like someone pacing a room. "You look different here," he said. "Less artificial lighting," I replied, smiling into my glass. "Number, that's not it." I turned to face him. He didn't back away. He didn't pretend. It's like you breathe deeper when he's not around. I didn't have a clever answer to that. Just air in my lungs that now felt too shallow. "Is that wrong?" I asked. He looked at me. Truly looked. And for the first time, I felt the ache of being seen. "It's not wrong to want air," he said. I felt it then. The closeness. The pull. Not sudden. Not violent. Like gravity. Like inevitability. The kiss came quietly. There was no fumbling, no urgency. Just warmth. Lips brushing skin in the way fingers touch old pages. His hand found my shoulder, then paused. Waiting. I didn't move. I didn't stop it. But this time I kissed him back. And when we pulled apart, we didn't speak. We just sat there, 2 glasses between us and the cold pressing against our skin like a question neither of us was ready to answer. The sheets smelled like pine and something faintly floral, washed too many times, too neutral to remember. I lay there with my back to the wall, listening to footsteps from the room next door. They weren't loud, just enough to make me feel him through the plaster. The distance between our beds felt both absurd and deliberate. I hadn't packed anything for this, of course. Just basics. But when I opened my bag, my hand brushed against a satin slip I didn't remember including. Ivory, thin, nearly weightless. A leftover from years ago, perhaps, when I still believed in preparing for intimacy like an event. I held it up in the dim light and hesitated. Then I put it on. Not for him. Not for myself, either. For the mirror. to see if I still recognized the woman beneath the layers I wore for other people. The night stretched long. I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, the hotel robe wrapped loosely around my shoulders, staring out at the dark tree line behind the building. I thought about my husband, where he might be at that moment. Probably on the couch with his laptop, a glass of whiskey untouched on the side table. He might call in the morning, or he might not. A soft knock. I didn't answer. The door opened anyway, slowly, no urgency. He stood there, hair tousled from lying down, eyes tired but alert. Neither of us moved for a few seconds. The air between us had texture. Thick, like something you could touch. I couldn't sleep, he said. Me neither. I was going to go for a walk. Thought I'd ask if you wanted to come. I didn't, but I nodded. We stepped out into the cool hallway, down the creaking stairs, and out onto the deck that wrapped around the building. The night had thinned, the wind gentler, stars scattered loosely like they'd been dropped. He handed me a blanket, then sat beside me on the steps. We didn't touch. Not at first. Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life? I asked. He looked at me sideways. Almost every day. What do you do with that? He paused. Try not to look too far ahead. It's easier to lie to yourself if you only think about the next step. That sounds exhausting. It is. There was something fragile in the space between our words, like neither of us wanted to break whatever spell held the silence together. He reached for my hand. No grand gesture, no sudden move. Just his fingers resting over mine. Warm, real. I turned toward him and he leaned in. Not impatiently, not with hunger, but with a kind of reverence that disarmed me. The kiss was slower this time. Deeper, not exploratory. Familiar. Like we'd done this before in another life, another version of ourselves. When it ended, I didn't look away. I didn't speak either. I shouldn't be here, he said, but he didn't move. And yet, I replied. He stood finally, helped me up, his hand steady around mine. I expected him to go back inside, to return to his room and leave the moment behind us like something borrowed. But he didn't. Let me stay, he said. Not tonight, I answered. Not yet. We stood there another moment, neither of us ready to let go. When he finally walked away, he didn't look back. And I watched him disappear into the corridor with the quiet certainty that this was no longer something we could stop. We returned the next afternoon, the drive quieter than the one before. Not tense, just full. He kept his eyes on the road, hands steady on the wheel, while I stared out the window, watching power lines stretch like veins across the landscape. Neither of us mentioned the kiss. Neither of us tried to label anything. There was no decision, no agreement. Just the weight of something that had happened and the quiet recognition that it wouldn't be the last. The house looked smaller than I remembered, as if the walls had shrunk while we were away. Or maybe I'd simply outgrown them. My husband greeted us at the door, cheerful in that restrained way he had when emotions made him uncomfortable. He hugged me, light and quick, and asked about the drive. I told him it was fine. He asked what we'd seen. I lied easily. At dinner, he brought out a bottle of wine and started showing us pictures from years ago. From when we first moved into the house, when I still wore lipstick for no reason and laughed at things I can't remember now. There was a photo of me sitting on the kitchen counter, barefoot, holding a mug with chipped enamel. My legs were crossed, and I was smiling at him. The camera, like I loved him too much to say it out loud. You haven't changed at all, he said, placing the photo on the table. I looked at her, the woman in the picture, and felt nothing but distance. I didn't recognize the softness in her eyes, the effortlessness of her body. I wanted to reach into the frame and tell her to be careful, that she would soon stop looking like this. Not because of time, but because of slow, invisible forgetting. I've changed completely, I said, quieter than I meant to. He smiled, not hearing me, or choosing not to. Later, I wandered into the study where he kept old prints and negatives, boxes of memories, mostly organized, labeled in his slanted handwriting. I flipped through them slowly, looking for something. I didn't know what. He came in behind me, the other one. I didn't turn. I knew his presence the way you know a shift in weather, instinctively. He said nothing, just watched me. Do you ever think about time? I asked. He stepped closer. All the time. How it moves past you, and you don't even realize you've stopped participating in your own life? He said nothing for a moment. Then, I think that's what most people call being safe. I turned to face him. There was something different in his expression. Not boldness, not temptation, just clarity. Like he saw something in me I didn't know was visible. His hand brushed mine as I passed him a roll of old film. A glance. A beat of silence. Downstairs, the hum of the dishwasher reminded me how easily routine masks everything. We stood in a room surrounded by images of the past, but it was the present that pressed itself into my chest like a stone. He didn't try to kiss me. He didn't reach for me. But the space between us had thinned, and as I left the room, I could feel him behind me. Still, not watching, waiting. My husband asked him for help with the archives the next morning. It wasn't unusual. He often found comfort in involving others in the quiet tasks that filled his days, the kind that required more hands than conversation. The old photo studio, barely used now, had become a kind of museum of his former self. Shelves stacked with film canisters, dusty lenses, notebooks filled with light readings and exposure charts. A place where nothing changed because nothing new ever entered. They left just after breakfast. I stayed behind, under the excuse of laundry and groceries, though I did neither. I sat in the sunroom for nearly an hour, a lukewarm cup of tea untouched in my hands, watching how the light shifted on the floorboards. Every few minutes, I checked the time, then scolded myself for it. By noon, I couldn't sit still any longer. The studio was only a short drive away, tucked at the edge of a quiet commercial block, next to a tailor's shop and a closed-down florist. I parked behind the building, out of habit more than secrecy. My hand hesitated on the door handle. There was no logical reason to be there. No invitation. But logic had stopped dictating my movements a long time ago. I found them inside, surrounded by cardboard boxes and plastic bins. My husband, sleeves rolled up, cataloging prints with quiet precision. He didn't notice me at first. The other one did. He didn't smile, didn't speak. Just met my eyes with a look that was neither surprise nor relief. Just presence. I nodded, casual, distant, walked toward a stack of portfolios and pretended to flip through them. My husband glanced up, pleasantly startled. "Didn't expect you here," he said. "But you're just in time. We found some old portraits of you. Look at this." He handed me a black and white print. It was from years ago, early in our marriage. I was seated in the studio chair, legs crossed, chin tilted slightly up. My hair was looser, my expression open. He had captured something in me that day. Something soft, unfinished. "You used to be more comfortable in front of the camera," he added with a chuckle. "I used to be a lot of things," I replied, running my thumb over the edge of the photo. He didn't seem to hear the weight in my words. Instead, he turned back to the negatives, discussing them with his son as if nothing had shifted beneath the surface. We worked in silence after that, the three of us moving around each other in choreographed avoidance. At some point, my husband stepped outside to take a call. I heard his voice muffled through the glass. Pleasant, professional, distracted. Behind me, I felt him approach. He didn't speak. He picked up a print from the table, held it beside me. "She looks like someone who hasn't made any decisions yet," he said. "She didn't know she was allowed to." I turned to him then, and he was too close. Close enough that I could see the faint scar near his jaw, the way his mouth parted slightly as if he was holding something back. "I can't keep pretending," he said. "Neither can I." There was no movement, no touch, but the words alone were heavier than any kiss. They changed everything, not because they were dramatic, but because they were true. Outside, the wind picked up. I watched a leaf brush against the studio window and stick for just a second before sliding away. We said nothing else. We didn't need to. I don't know exactly when silence became easier than words. It wasn't always this way. There were years when we spoke late into the night, legs entangled under the sheets, whispering plans we never wrote down. But over time, language lost its urgency. We began to survive on assumption, on routine, on the dull comfort of being known just enough to stop asking questions. That morning, I made breakfast out of habit. Toast, eggs, coffee. My husband ate without looking at me, scrolling through his phone between bites. He asked about my sleep. I said it was fine. He nodded. I asked about his meetings. He said they went well. That was the extent of our intimacy. The worst part wasn't the lack of passion. It was how normal the absence felt. After he left, the house felt too large again. I wandered from room to room, touching surfaces without knowing why. The edge of the kitchen table, the hallway banister, the windowsill in the bedroom. Everything felt distant, as though it belonged to someone else. Even the framed wedding photo on the dresser looked like a prop from another life. I found myself in the laundry room, folding clothes that didn't need folding. His shirt was there, the one he wore to the studio. It still smelled faintly of cologne and dust. I pressed it to my face, then immediately felt ashamed of the gesture. Not because I missed him, because I didn't. I hadn't seen the other one in 2 days. No messages, no late-night knocks, no glances in shared spaces. He was still in the house somewhere, but the lines we had carefully blurred were now sharpened again by distance. And yet, the silence between us was louder than ever. That evening, after dinner, I walked into the living room while my husband was watching TV. I sat beside him on the couch, close enough for our shoulders to touch. He didn't react. I turned my face toward him. He looked over, surprised. I kissed him. Not out of longing, not out of guilt, out of a need to understand. His mouth moved against mine, slow at first, then eager. His hand slid to my back. Familiar paths, familiar pressure. But I didn't feel anything. My body responded out of memory, not desire. I closed my eyes and searched for warmth. There was none. Afterward, I went upstairs before he could speak. I stood in the shower for a long time, letting the water scald my skin as if that might wake something in me. But there was only numbness. Later, in the dark of my room, I heard my phone buzz. A message. Just a single line. "Are you still awake?" I stared at the screen, heart pacing. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The next night, another message. "I don't know how to stop wanting you." I lay in bed, the words buzzing under my skin. I thought about every moment I had said no, and how each time it meant less. I thought about how I had tried to stay still, and how the ground kept shifting anyway. The third night, I wrote back. Then don't know name, no signature, just that. And it was enough. The house felt quieter that morning, though nothing had changed. Same creaking floorboards, same humming fridge, same soft weight of sky pressing through the windows. But there was something in the air, like the hush before a confession or the pause between final lines of a song you never want to end. I moved through the kitchen barefoot, touching the counter as if to steady myself, though I wasn't sure from what. My husband had already left for a short business trip. He kissed me on the cheek before he walked out the door and told me not to wait up the next night. I nodded, folded his collar, and watched his car disappear down the driveway. On the table, my phone lay silent. No new messages, no calls. But I knew. There was an address scribbled on a note in my purse. A small apartment just outside the city. He hadn't asked me to come. He'd only given me the choice. I packed nothing. I changed into a loose sweater, jeans that had grown soft with wear, and a long wool coat that still held the scent of autumn. I didn't wear perfume. I didn't do my hair. I wasn't going for him. I was going for whatever part of me still had the courage to move forward. The drive took less than an hour. Trees flanked the road like quiet sentinels. My hands stayed firm on the wheel, but my mind twisted around itself. Every memory folded inward, the heat of his fingers grazing mine, the silence that had said more than any declaration, the kiss on the balcony, the ache in his voice when he said he couldn't pretend. When I arrived, I didn't get out of the car immediately. I sat there, engine off, staring at the dull brick building and its faded green door. No lights in the window, no silhouette behind the curtains. I could leave. I could turn around and pretend none of this happened. The road behind me was still clear, but I didn't move. I reached into my bag and pulled out the keys to my house. Held them in my palm. They felt heavier than usual. Was this what betrayal really was? Not the act itself, but the moment before, when you realize you've already crossed the line and there's no undoing it. When you understand that staying where you are is just another form of dishonesty. I got out of the car. The air was sharp with cold. I wrapped my coat tighter, walked up the path, and stood in front of the door. My hand hovered above the handle. I didn't knock. I didn't need to. He opened it before I touched it, as if he'd been standing there the entire time. We didn't speak. His eyes met mine, steady but searching. I saw everything there. Desire, confusion, guilt, want. He stepped back to let me in. I didn't cross the threshold. I looked past him into the room. Plain walls, a half-made bed, books stacked in uneven piles on the floor. A space without pretense. My breath caught, not from fear, but from the weight of what was about to begin. "I'm not here to hide," I said. He nodded. "I'm not asking you to." I looked down at my keys, then closed my fingers around them. They made a dull sound as they slid into my coat pocket. "I don't know what this is," I added, voice thin. "Neither do I. But I'm tired of not feeling anything," I whispered. His hand reached out. Not to pull me in, not to claim, just to offer. And this time, I took it. Not because it was right. Not because it was easy, but because pretending I was still the woman in the photograph had finally become unbearable. I stepped inside, and the door closed behind me.